Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about the data flow diagram for current production systems for YESA Textile SDN PhD. So for the step 1 is making the schedule, which is preparing the master schedule production. When customer places an order, the sales department send information here. At the same time, they check the inventory level to see whether there is stock, and they combine the data to create a production schedule, which is then sent to the master production schedule. Step 2 is planning the materials, which is process 2.0, prepare the base of material. These steps looks at production goals. We just save in the schedule file. Calculates exactly the raw materials we need to make the textiles. Once figured it out, it saves the raw material requirement to the base of material file. Next is sending out requests. Finally, we have 3.0, where we prepare the material requisition form. I think of this as a paperwork hub. Based on the material that we need, the process creates material requisition form and sends to 3 places, which is purchasing department, storeroom, and to material requisition file. So next is step 4, which is begin production. This is where the factory works happen. Materials are processed and finished goods are sent to the storeroom. But if there is any additional material request, it is sent to the base of material file. Next is 5.0, which is prepare the job time ticket. This is to track how much time and labor are being spent in making the goods. The information is put on a job time ticket and a copy is sent to the accounting department to calculate labor cost and handle payroll. Next is step 6, which is pack the finished goods. The goods are packed and moved to the storeroom, which is ready to be shipped to customers. And that wraps up the entire production cycle of YESA Textile SDN PhD. Thank you.
For the next slide, which is Part B Question 1A, I will be explaining the 4 basic activities in the expenditure cycle and relating each activity to the case of Sedap Crispy Sindiran Berhad. Let's start with the first activity, which is ordering goods and services. This activity begins when a company identifies that additional inventory or supplies are needed. The main purpose is to make sure that the company has enough stock to support its daily operations and meet customer demand. In the case of Sedap Crispy Sindiran Berhad, this process starts when the stock of tapioca crackers becomes low. Employees from both the administrative and operating departments can submit purchase requests. The purchasing clerks then combines orders for the same supplier into a single purchase order to reduce ordering costs and improve efficiency. After that, the clerk search for suppliers online and select the supplier who's offering the lowest price before placing the order. So basically, these steps help Sedap Crispy Sindiran Berhad to maintain a sufficient inventory while keeping purchasing costs under control, allowing the business to operate without any interruption. Now let's move on to the second activity, which is receiving goods and services. This activity takes place once all the goods arrive from the supplier. At this stage, the receiving department is responsible for checking whether the goods received match the order in terms of quantity and description. In the case of Sedap Crispy Sindiran Berhad, when the crackers arrive from the supplier in Johor, the receiving clerk checks the goods against the packing slip provided by the supplier. Once everything has been verified, the crackers are transferred to the store for storage, while the packing slip is forwarded to the account clerk for further processing. In other words, this is the company ways of confirming that the correct goods have been received before they are stored or recorded, helping to reduce the risk of error or missing items. Next is the third activity, which is approving supplier invoice. After the goods have been received, the company needs to verify the supplier invoice to make sure that all the information is accurate and the payment is only made for goods that were actually ordered and received. This process also helps to prevent overbilling, duplicate payments or payment for goods that were never been delivered. In the case of Sedap Crispy Sindiran Berhad, when the supplier invoice arrives, the account clerk compares the invoice with the packing slip received from the receiving department. If both documents match, the invoice is verified and forwarded to the accounting department for further processing. From this process, we can see that the company carefully verifies verifies every invoice before making any payment, helping to avoid unnecessary costs and payments errors. Finally, the last activity, which is cash disbursement. Cash disbursement refers to the process of paying supplier for the goods or services received. Before any payment is made, all supporting documents should be reviewed to ensure that the transaction is valid and accurate. In the case of Sedap Crispy Sendirian Berhad, the accounting department received the verified invoice and checked all the relevant documents before authorizing any payment. Once everything has been confirmed, payment is made to the supplier. This will help to ensure that suppliers are paid accurately and on time while maintaining a proper financial records. Finally, once all the documents have been verified, the company can make payment confidently, ensuring suppliers are paid correctly while maintaining proper financial records and strong financial control.
Next, for question 1B, based on the witnesses above, suggest a control procedures that can overcome the witnesses. First, Sedap Crispy Sendirian Berhad should restrict the authority to submit purchase requisition to authorized employees, such as department heads, supervisors, or the storekeeper who is responsible for monitoring inventory levels. In addition, the company should implement system access control so that only authorized users can create purchase requests. And every request should go through an approval workflow before it is forwarded to the purchasing clerk. This control is important because the case states that both administrative and operational department employees can enter purchase requests whenever items are low in stock without any restriction. Employees may submit unnecessary duplicate or even fraudulent purchase requests for personal benefit. By limiting this responsibility to authorized personnel, the company can ensure that purchase requests are valid, necessary and based on actual inventory requirement, thereby reducing unnecessary purchasing costs and the risk of fraud. Second, no authorized list of suppliers. Sedap Crispy Sendirian Berhad should establish and maintain an approved supplier vendor list. Before a supplier is added to this list, management should evaluate the supplier based on several criteria, including price, product quality, delivery reliability, reputation and previous performance. Once approved, the purchasing clerk should only purchase goods from suppliers included in the approved vendor list, unless special approval is obtained. In the case, the purchasing clerk selects suppliers simply by conducting an internet search for the lowest price. Choosing suppliers based only on price increases the risk of purchasing poor quality crackers, dealing with unreliable suppliers, or even transacting with fraudulent suppliers. By using an approved vendor list, the company can ensure that purchases are made from trusted suppliers who consistently provide quality products and reliable delivery while still obtaining competitive prices.
Next, no authorization on the order made by the clerk. All purchase order prepared by the purchasing clerk should require authorization from the purchasing manager or another responsible manager before being sent to the suppliers. The manager should review the purchase requisition, verify that the purchase is necessary, ensure that the quantity is reasonable and confirm that the selected supplier is an approved vendor before approving the order. According to the case, no approval is needed for the order made by the purchasing clerk, meaning the clerk has complete authority to place orders. This creates a significant risk that the unauthorized purchase, excessive order or even fraudulent purchase could occur without management knowledge. Requiring managerial approval provides an important internal control by ensuring that every purchase is properly reviewed, justified and authorized before company funds are committed. No copy of the order form being sent to the receiving clerk. A copy of the approval purchase order should be sent directly to the receiving department before the goods arrive. The receiving clerk should compare the items received with the purchase order and the supplier's delivery documents to verify that the correct product and quantities have been delivered. Ideally, the receiving clerk should receive a blind copy of the purchase order that does not show the quantities ordered, requiring the clerk to physically count the goods received. In the case, the receiving clerk only checks each item against the supplier packing slip because no purchase order is provided. This means the receiving clerk cannot independently verify whether the supplier delivered the correct quantity or types of goods ordered. Sending the purchase order to the receiving department strengthens the receiving process by allowing discrepancies such as missing, incorrect or excess item to be identified immediately before the inventory is accepted into storage. Lastly, no restriction on access to stock. Sedap Kris Sdn Bhd should restrict access to the inventory storeroom so that only authorized personnel such as the storekeeper or warehouse staff are allowed to enter. Employees who require inventory should submit a stock requisition form that has been approved by their supervisor before inventory is released. Furthermore, the company should maintain detailed inventory records and perform regular physical stock counts to ensure that actual inventory matches the recorded inventory. The case states that although the inventory is kept in a locked room, any employee can enter the room during working hours and remove items, while the clerk simply records what has been taken. This will control increase the risk of theft, unauthorized use of inventory shortage, and inaccurate inventory records. Restricting physical access and requiring proper authorization for every inventory withdrawal improve accountability, protects company assets, and ensure that inventory records remain accurate and reliable.
Part C. Lina has recently joined as an internal auditor at Sedap Kris Sdn Bhd. During her review of procurement activities, she noticed several red flags. For example, some items were ordered in quantities exceeding what was required by the departments. She also found that new vendors with little track records were being given large contracts, while reliable vendors were bypassed. On top of that, a payment had been processed despite the supporting documents not matching the actual delivery. Discuss 3 possible fraud risks in the expenditure cycle based on Lina's findings. First one is purchasing fraud. What is purchasing fraud? Purchasing fraud happens when someone buys more goods than the company actually needs for dishonest reasons. It happens when an employee orders extra items on purpose. The extra goods may be kept for personal use, stolen, or sold to someone else. This actually happens when there is weak control over the purchasing process. Related to this case, Lina found that some items were ordered in larger quantities than the departments needed. This could be purchasing fraud because someone may be ordering extra items for personal benefit. As a result, the company wastes money and has unnecessary inventory.
Let's move on to the number 2, which is fraudulent vendor scheme. To put it simply, this happens when company contracts are handed out to suppliers based on personal interest or favoritism, rather than a fair evaluation or following standard company policies. So, how does this actually play out? Usually, it involves the employees who are in charge of selecting vendors. They might get reeled in by receiving kickbacks, commission, or other personal perks from specific suppliers. Because of this conflict of interest, they end up choosing new or completely unqualified vendors while completely bypassing the reliable ones. In the end, the company lose out because they start paying higher price for poor quality products. Now, if we connect this to our case study, Lina found some pretty clear red flags. She noticed that massive contracts were easily being awarded to brand new vendors with barely any track record, while our trusted long-term suppliers were completely pushed aside. This strongly points toward a potential fraudulent vendor scheme, most likely involving bribery or a serious conflict of interest in the procurement. Moving on to our third point, let's talk about false or unauthorized payment. In simple terms, this refers to any payment made for goods or services without proper verification or valid supporting documents. It's basically sending money out the door without double checking if it's legitimate. So, how does this actually happen in a company? It usually boils down to weak verification procedures. Employees might rush through the process and approve payment without properly checking essential documents like purchase order, invoice, or delivery notes. When these controls are weak, it opens the floodgate for invoice fraud, duplicate payments, or worse, paying for goods that the company never even received. If we tie this back to our case, Lina detected a major red flag. She noticed that a specific payment was processed even though the supporting document didn't match what was actually delivered. This is meaning that the company might have heavily overpaid or paid for incomplete orders without anyone noticing.